Welcome to the Dalen Show, everybody. So glad to have you here. I'm Dalen Flowers. He's Russ Eddins. So welcome to episode number 3 of Cardinals Talk. On today's show, we've got a lot to talk about. First time seeing you guys since before the Brewers series. We recorded episode number 2. So a bunch of things to talk about in today's episode. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, man. All love, good luck. Cardinals have won 7 of the last 8 games, Russ. I think 2.5 games behind the Cardinals now in the standings, tied with the Brewers. We've been discussing behind off camera as well, but we were getting a little concerned about where the direction of the season looked to be heading, coming out of a rough ending to May and struggling at the start of June as well. What have you been seeing so far over the last couple of weeks to see the resurgence of what this team is finally, hopefully, looking like to move forward in the rest of the further parts of the season?
Well, as a fan, I was about checked out. I think not checked out, but I
Me
was
too,
I
man.
was losing I was losing hope. I was like, this is it. They had a good month of May, but we're back to what we've seen the past year and a half or so. It's done. The year's over. But they found their footing. They sort of made a good climb there, and they fell down, and they stopped the free fall. Honestly,
Yeah.
they lost 4 or 5 in a row. Got by the Blue Jays, who are a good team. But they found their way again. And only the third episode, but every episode so far, I've mentioned BABIP and being sustainable. And what they're doing right now is sustainable.
Yeah.
They're obviously 5-6 home runs past 2 games. Probably not going to see that much more. But they play well against the Cubs. You're supposed to beat the White Sox. Good job there. To take 2 games out of a doubleheader, not easy to do. They've sort of depleted the bullpen the past couple of weeks. They're tired. They need a break. A lot of games right now, but they're figuring it out. They're playing good baseball. And as a fan, as an analyst, whatever you want to call what it is we do, it's fun to watch. It's fun to be a part of. It sucks to be a part of a team or have a podcast about a team that sucks. But they don't suck right now. They're playing good baseball. They're playing motivated baseball. I think Arenado said about a month ago, they're coming to the ballpark and they're expecting the win. And I think they sort of lost that. They found it again, and that's a hallmark of a good team. Finding ways to win, or you go through losing streak and you find yourself again. I think they finally found themselves again.
Yeah, man. I think playing the Reds and playing the White Sox couldn't have come at a better time. Those are teams that you're expected to win. And some people will be like, oh, you swept the White Sox and you beat the Reds. You're supposed to do that. Well, it also would have been very backfired if the Cardinals would have went in and lost those 2 series. So I think struggling the way the Cardinals did, playing against 2 teams that were below caliber in terms of the season that is gone for them, like the White Sox and the Reds, were huge for the Cardinals. Getting a little bit momentum back, building a little bit back of more of that confidence, especially heading into this Cubs series. This is a series that I think myself and a lot of people have just been waiting on all year. The first time that the Cardinals and Cubs have finally met in the regular season. And you feel the vibe from the players, and you read the energy, you're hearing the emotions in the post-game press conferences. Nolan Arenado said it yesterday. He was just happy to play this team. He was happy to still be here after so much went on in the offseason. He was happy to still be here and play against the Cubs. And I feel like that energy is being ridiculed throughout the dugout right now. We're seeing Nootbaar, get back into a groove that I saw him at the start of the season, but over, the end of May and the start of June, he was struggling. Donnie is playing, as best as baseball as anyone in baseball right now. But I think that those 2 series before this Cubs series were huge because it built the momentum back going into a series that really could have made or break where the Cardinals were headed for. The Cardinals have won the first 2 games of the series so far. We're recording this on June 25th. They play Game 3 tonight, and I think it was just very beneficial to have those 2 series right before playing the Chicago Cubs this year.
Yeah, and the Reds, they're not a bad baseball team. They're in contention. They just took 2 out of 3 from the Yankees and go for this sweep tonight. They brought up their number 2 prospect, or the number 1 prospect, number 2 overall in baseball, I think. Was so much fun to watch last night. I got the chance to watch his first inning in professional baseball, and he mowed Aaron Judge down, Paul Goldschmidt. I forget the third batter in that order, but really good job, from him last night. But the Reds aren't a bad baseball team. They're knocking on the door. Obviously, they're going to fall off. They do every summer. the hype train gets going and they
Mhm.
sort of fall off. But they got a good manager and Terry Francona. They're gonna figure it out eventually. But not the best baseball team in the world, but it's good to beat a divisional rival who is right there. They're not far off from contention, and they're above 500. So it's always nice to be the team who's above 500 like that. But yeah, like you mentioned Newt Bar and what he's been doing. He a big slump, but he's figured it out. He's batting at a 201 WRC plus, which 100 is league average. That's a threshold. So he's batting better than the league average player significantly.
Yeah.
He's the number would say he's 101% better than the league average hitter right now with 201 WRC plus in the last 8 games. Take that for what you will. Small sample size, but his slug is up to 680. He's getting on base at a good clip. He's always been strikeout number is always similar to walk rate. Here it's 16.1% walk rate. Just north of 19th K rate. You got Burley. He's got 727 slug right now, doing really really well.
Yeah.
Mason Wynn is walking just as much as he's striking out. That's good for me of a young player. Victor Scott's figuring it out a little bit. Still struggling from a lot of the numbers, but he's getting on base. Nolan Arenado is slugging 500. Did not have that on my bingo card this year. He's figured it out a little bit, and he's played inspired baseball. And then
Yeah.
Nolan Gorman, he's still figuring it out. He's got a 500 slug too in the last 8 games. All these over the last 8 games. So they're figuring it out. From Nolan Gorman, we don't need him to bat 300 or 250.
Mhm.
If he wants to bat 225 and hit 30 bombs a year, that's fine for me. But I'm really impressed with what they've been playing, and all of it's sustainable. All of it can keep on going. It's not like they're hitting 10 home runs a game. Their BABIP is south of 300, which is
Mhm.
I love BABIP probably a little too much, but I think they're playing some inspired, sustainable baseball, and I'm really excited to see these next 2 games. And then you got 3 more next week against the Cubs.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of players, and I want to kind of build one of those players in as well as Wilson Contreras. I think that before we even kind of come up with the idea of doing this series, and before episode 1, we were really concerned about Wilson and Mason Wynn and how much they were going to be able to really sustain a competitive, awareness of their game. When Wilson went to first base this year, it was kind of like, what is he going to be able to do there? In my personal opinion, I felt like he was going to be focusing too much on being a good first baseman instead of having the offensive qualities that this team needed. But he stepped up really a lot over the last couple weeks. And I think his energy is just as radiant as Lars Newbart is. I think when he's feeling it, when he's vibing, when he's grooving, this team is also feeding off of that energy. And Mason Wynn as well. Mason is really catching my eye over the last few weeks. I think that he's been developing his game really well, staying calm on all points of his game, defense, offense. I think that he's developed really strongly. And both of those guys are at a better point right now in the season than I thought they were going to be. And I think those two players are very vital for where this Cardinals team wants to go in the future. I think that Mason's defensive ability not only builds on the rest of the infielders, but I think his energy is now building onto where he's confident in the box. And when he's batting up there, I feel like Mason has a chance to get a hit against any pitcher in the game right now. And that's just how confident he is. And I hope it's sustainable, because you get to this point, and we talked about in episode 2 how important the month of June was. Well, we're seeing it right now. 1-7 the last 8 games. Didn't give up on not having a chance to win the division. It could have been very easy for this team, after the Blue Jays series to sit back and be like, okay, we've got nothing. This is as far as we're going to go. This is as much fight as we had. But they've quickly adapted, and they've continued to fight for a chance to still compete in this division and win this division at some point in the season. So I'm very proud of how far this team has come over the last few weeks, and as well, the standard that Oliver Marmol has set. It's a lot of backlash has been on him, for myself included,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of just his technical ability, his situational awareness, just the job he's done since his time here over the last, I think this is year 3 for him now. And so I'm going to give him his flowers right now. I think that he's figured out a way to not let the ball drop when things get a little bit hard for this team. And I really had to give him and his staff really props for what they've been able to do this season.
Yeah, and it's not like they're in some easy. It's not like they're in some easy division. It's
Mhm.
tough. The Cubs are one of the best teams in baseball. Obviously, they're sort of on the back end right now, going through some struggles. I think they're 4-6, 5-5 in their last 10. right around the 500 mark, but not where they've been all season. They're better than what they've been playing. Like, I'm a Cardinals fan my whole life. I hate the Cubs as much as the next Cardinals fan, but they're a good baseball team, and it's good to see them back. I was a little young to remember. Well, I remember this well actually, but I was a little young to understand the importance of their 2016 World Series. I
Yeah.
remember then it was like they hadn't been good in 100 years, forever. And it's nice to see them, as an adult, them be good and the Cardinals be good at the same time. It's nice to see those two overlap and finally, bring that rivalry back a little bit. It's really fun to see. As much as I don't want them to do well, it's nice to see them do well, honestly. Especially when the Cardinals are so good. And we have Contreras, who we sort of took them a few years ago in free agency. It's really nice to see them play well. But obviously, I want to hopefully we take all 7 games next week. But yeah, Contreras, he's starting to go a little bit. He's figured it out. He was really hot this year. I think he's cooled down decently, but he's done really well. And I'm really happy with his workload. At first base, at the plate. Back to the point I was making about the division, it's not easy. The Brewers are going right now. They're doing well, and the Cardinals have found a really good time to be hot. The Brewers they swept the Twins, who are falling off the face of the earth. They're going well. Reds took 2 out of 3 from them, beating the Yankees now. So now it's a good time for them to really get going and keep up with the rest of the division. And just a matter of keeping on, because they're not gonna rattle off. I mean, they won what 9 in a row a while back, but they're not gonna go on a 16-4 streak to really put themselves at the top of the division. They got to be consistently good. They can't fall off again. I wouldn't think they if they have a bad stretch like they did in early June, I'd imagine we're holding on to that third wild card spot, if not being out of it entirely. But they got to keep on keeping on. You rattle off 5 in a row. I think they're in a good spot, but it's a tough stretch. 15 games, 14 days. They got to keep on going. I don't think they can really survive another bad stint. But maybe it's just they got to keep on doing it. Right now they're holding on, but one more bad stint. Next week or so, they're right back to where we were early this month.
Yeah, I think it's easy because as well. I want to ask you. Just you talked about it just for a quick hot second earlier. Just the bullpen is inconsistent a little bit. You find those times where Libby in game 1 against the Cubs is dealing on all cards, but then you go back a few weeks ago and in 2 straight games, 2 different series, Libby's kind of looking a little clueless out there, and then you go to different guys, maybe like Eric Fetty, who's on the mound tonight, and Leahy, they're still trying to find their rhythm. But I think it's important to understand that this pitching staff is not as good as I'd like it to be, but I think it's a lot better than I expected it to be before the season started. And I think that's something that gives me a little bit more momentum moving forward. I think that if we can have those games like Libby gave us in game 1 against the Cubs, then this team is set for success. So I want to ask you, just what are your thoughts about the bullpen right now? There's so much going on in terms of high totality and within the games over the next couple of weeks. How do you think they're doing right now? Do you think they're able to sustain a little bit of success moving forward over the next couple of weeks as the month
Yeah,
gets ready?
yeah, that's a good question. The pen's been taxed for sure. I've listened to the broadcast with Chip, and they've talked about that extensively. How taxed they are, and it was really good that Libby could go up on Monday night and give us some good length. McGreevy not so much last night. I still love McGreevy. I still think he's the next big thing for Cardinals
Yeah.
rotation.
Those
So,
games happen. You're not going to have
yeah,
a two hits, one run game as a pitcher every night. Those nights happen.
yeah, and his ERA ballooned a good bit from 2 to
Mhm.
4 ish. That's okay, and he's young. I don't expect him to go out there every night and perform, like Libby did the other night against a great Cubs lineup. The Cubs are good. They're going to figure it out. They're going to hit the ball around. Kyle Tucker, one of the best players in all baseball, PCA. Despite the bonehead play last night, he's he's really good. I hate the guy. He's good at baseball. And they're going to hit the ball. They're going to hit the ball
Yeah.
a lot, and they did last night against him. A couple good innings, and then he's gotten some trouble. But the bullpen hasn't been bad. I actually like the bullpen overall. I think they're that top third in baseball. I'd imagine numbers might not back that up, but I think as far as like Ryan Helsley really carries that name strength. Jojo Romero has been good. Phil Maton, the only sign they had in the offseason, kind of
Yeah.
really important there. Kyle Leahy, had an article about him for baseball a couple weeks ago. Love what he's doing. But the Stars have sort of carried recently. They've had a 2.90 ERA or 2.89 ERA in the stretch. Bullpen's at a 4.31. But what I really want to point out is the expected numbers are significantly lower than what we're actually seeing. ERA is a good estimate, but the FIP, the field independent pitching, it's lower, and the expected FIP is even lower than that. So it's not this four ERA isn't going to last the whole rest of this month. It's going to come back down, and they've only had 30 innings pitched in this stretch, which is actually a decent amount. I think I say it out loud. But it's okay for the bullpen to sort of fall back on their heels a little bit during the stretch. But when they get that rest they need, come on the All-Star break here in about less than a month. 19 games to go, less than that. They're going to come out strong in the second half. They're going to come out strong in July. They just need that off day or two, and I think they'll be good. If Feddy can go out and give them 5 strong tonight, I think they'll be fine to continue the game or to pick them up. But yeah, I'm really happy with what they've done. They've done just enough to sort of keep me happy. But give me a day off, here, and they probably have a day off in week and a half, and I think they'll be good to go. They just got to keep on keeping on, find that little extra momentum to get us through the stretch.
Yeah, I think that it's inspiring to see some of the guys that are young in our bullpen still developing, but looking really good these early parts of their career so far. I think that guys like Leahy have a really good chance to develop and be something really good in terms of where their potential can be. I think that this point of the season, it couldn't have come at a better time for St. Louis. Like you said, with the All-Star game lurking in behind and some needed rest as well, because I still think that this team is not at their full potential. And I say that I think that we see Nolan Gorman go on those little streaks every year, and although it doesn't last for long, he has, back-to-back games with 2 homers now against the Cubs. And hopefully that gives him a little bit of strength to, stay hot before the All-Star game break. We still don't have Jordan Walker back, which hopefully in a time span soon we get him back, who was dealing before he got injured. I think that fans were a little bit concerned about how Brendan Donovan was going to be able to come back from his day-to-day injury, but he's still sustained to be, one of the best batters in baseball this year. I think that I want to ask you is, do you think this team has a chance to be in the playoffs? And if so, what kind of maneuvers do they need to make to get to postseason baseball this year?
Yeah, I for sure think that they have the chance to play in playoffs, which is not something I thought about, in March, because the NL is so deep. The Padres, I've said this a lot this episode, throw on their back foot right now. They're going to figure things out. Giants, I think, will come back down to earth. I don't really believe in them long term. I like what Buster Posey is doing, for multiple seasons, but right now I don't believe in the Giants enough. Cubs are going to be there. Dodgers are going to be there. Mets, I don't know what they're doing over there in Queens. They've lost their mojo. The Phillies, opposite. I've listened to a lot of podcasts and whatnot, and people seem to believe that Atlanta's going to be there in the end. I don't think they're going to be in there in the end. I think this is the year that they realize that they've messed up a little bit. This long-term strategy, locking players up, works, but when they don't perform, it doesn't work at all. And they went 0-7, they get in the year, and they went on some good streaks, and they've been some bad streaks. I don't really believe in them. Maybe that's stupid of me to say. They like the Brewers, and you just never count them out. But I'm hoping the Braves sort of fall off again, and don't make the playoffs, because that leads toward the Cardinals. But right now, I think that the NL is so deep, it's going to be really challenging, but they're right there. They have a position right now. I think they're tied for that third wild card spot with the Brewers. Yeah. And sort of, we think we were 1 game under 500 against the Brewers. We played 7 games against them. We're 3-4 maybe, something like that. They haven't played bad against the Brewers. Still got 6 games left. But they are a playoff caliber team. But so is half the National League is the issue. If you go in the American League, you got the Tigers, Yankees, Blue Jays, maybe the Rays. If you believe in the Red Sox, if you're into that, and then Astros and Mariners. That's it. Yeah. You can make a case for the majority of teams in the NL to make playoffs. So that's the biggest threat they have. As far as what they need to do to make that take that next step, it's a seller's market. I don't think they're going to be able to go out and get a lot in the deadline. It's going to have to come from internal. You're going to have to rely on some of your prospects. And I think McGreevy. It's time for him to be a full time, but is going to be in that taxi man role. Coming up for doubleheaders and whatnot. I think he's got to give you some depth this year. You're gonna have to count some prospects. I'm not sure where Ian Bettle is at. I think is his name. He's a top prospect for Cardinals. He's a reliever. Let's bring him up. In August. Let's see how he does. Let's start relying on the prospects a little bit because there's gonna be so many buyers. It's for the sellers. It's gonna be there's so many teams in the National League they're gonna want to add that sellers are gonna make some good capital, some good gains off of this deadline. So it's really going to come from internal.
Yeah. I love your point, and I think I don't think a trade was going to actually happen with this team, but I think some of these players were looking at the totality of could I be traded if my game doesn't step up at this time and moment? Could I be on the trade block and be looked to shop if I don't improve where I'm going right now? And I think that is kind of blended on some of these players. I think that Ryan Helsley wasn't going to be traded, but I think that there was definitely that accusation of is this guy really sustainable? I think that we had talked about this on episode 2. You asked me kind of about Helsley and, that I think was he able to kind of just move forward in terms of his game. I think that Helsley has the ability to be a superstar, and he has been over his last few years. But is it sustainable? Have people figured him out? And I think that he's come close to being talked about in that trade rumor, but I think he solidified himself over the last few weeks to to still be here. And same with other guys like Maton. I think that Maton, even though this is his first year here, he was only free agency. I think that people were getting a little bit rusty with him, but he's been really vital over the 3 games that he's played for the Cardinals this year. And I think that he's shown a lot of potential. I think that when you look at where the Cardinals move forward over the next couple of weeks, Guardians after this Cup series, Pittsburgh, and then the Wrigley Field, there's opportunities to build this confidence and build this consistency of success right now. I think that those 2 series with a Guardians team that has been in and out of, kind of, around the 500 mark this season, the Pirates who've struggled, of course. These are great opportunities to continue building this momentum, but you have to take care of business first right now, which is, winning this series against the Cubs. You don't want to win the first 2 games in the fashion that they won in game 1 with dominant fashion, then coming back in game 2 and then not end up winning this series. So you really want to take care of the Cubs, but as well, you want to continue building that confidence when you get ready to go to Wrigley Field in about 3 weeks. So it's a really exciting time for St. Louis, but I think that the players still need to have their heels up and their toes ready to do anything possible to win these games over the next few weeks.
Yeah, talking about Ron Helsley, this is his last year's contract. After this, he's a free
Mm-hmm.
agent. So it's kind of like a Josh Hader situation in 22, I think, when the Brewers traded him. They were in contention. They fell off after that. The Cardinals took the division because they traded Hader. So that's what I think anyway. If they don't trade Hader, they probably win the division. They lost all morale. They were done for. And I don't know if Helsley is that kind of player for the Cardinals, but they're after him. Who are you going to put in that closer spot? Jojo Romero?
Exactly.
Who's going to be in that spot? I think he's a certified closer. I don't really think you can trade him, but I mean, if they did, I'd be kind of surprised, but also I just hope they got enough for him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's either you lose him in the offseason or you hope to make playoffs.
Yeah.
Because with the way they've been winning in the past few years, they're not going to re-sign him. He's probably worth what Hader got 5 for 100 million, 90 million.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably worth a little less than that. I would say 5 for 80, 85, 90 was his ceiling. Who knows? Maybe the Dodgers are going to get him and backload the whole contract like do everything else. But it would be crazy. But I think you kind of have to talk to him soon about a contract extension, getting him in. I think he wants to go to free agency. But with what they're playing right now, the future's kind of bright. Yep, young talent is ready to go. The farm system isn't incredibly deep, but the ones who are, it's pretty top heavy. I would imagine. I would say. But the ones who are ready to go, they're knocking on the door. They're ready to perform. You got Cooper Jerpy down there. Gordon Graceffa is ready to take over in a couple years. Chase Davis is struggling a bit, but JJ Weatherholt, the number 1 prospect in the Cardinal system, he's ready to go. So I think it's an exciting time for him. He can either go make a bunch of money, take a little less stake in St. Louis, but he's going to be a part of something really special.
I'm glad you brought that up because, if you don't mind, could you go a little bit more in depth about? Because I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about the future of this franchise? I think with some of the guys you just named, of course, Weatherholt being the biggest, there's a lot of upside within the farm
Mhm.
system and the guys that are ready to kind of come up, whether at the end of this year or next year. Where do you see the future of this franchise moving forward? Are you excited about what you think the potential and the ability of this St. Louis baseball team has to do in the next, maybe 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I'm really excited with what they can do. I'm a big St. Louis Sports City fan. I like what the Blues are doing, and I brought it up last week. But the Blues are in this position where they're going to compete now. The Cardinals
Hmm.
aren't quite there yet. The Cardinals, and the Blues are sort of in a similar position. They have been. Blues have taken a step up, I think, but the Cardinals are right there. They're a good draft away and a good free agent signing from being right there, from the window reopening.
Yeah.
Right now, JJ Weatherholt is the number one prospect. And you got Quinn Matthews, who I think is from Stanford, and a catcher, and then Teen Kent, who I'm really excited about. Catching depth is insanely strong, I must say. And then Chase Davis, fans remember him a few years ago. He's in Double A, hasn't done super well, but he'll figure it out. I hope he does. And then McGreevy's in that ninth position. He's MLB ready. He's my guy. I think he's here for the long haul.
Hmm.
And then Cooper Jerpy, who I've heard about for years, and Gordon Graceffo's sort of fallen off. He's down in the 16th position now in terms of that. And then you got Nathan Church and Michael Kopernak, I think say his name. They're ready. They're going to be in a few years. If they're not in St. Louis in the next 2 years, you got to trade them because they're producing. Maybe not at a MLB readiness yet, but Nathan Church is doing the damn thing down at AAA. He's getting it done. Matt, I think he's sort of had an off year. Yeah, his numbers are a bit lower than you'd expect. You'd like from last year. But those are two guys that are going to figure it out. And then, like I said, mentioned earlier, Ian Bettle, number 27 prospect. He's a relief pitcher. He's not going to be top 100 or nothing. But he's getting it done down there in the minors. ERA is a little high right now. But he also just made the transition from Double A to Triple A, so it's going to be a little inflated. Relievers, it's always going to be a little higher. But I'm really excited about what they can do. I'm really excited about what Chime Bloom can do. I think it's time to move on. But yeah, the future is pretty bright. I think you're one draft away, one free agent away from being a real contender going forward.
100%, man. Look, Eric Fetty, Matthew Boyd on the mound tonight, 6:45 p.m. Central. Cardinals hopefully look to take the series
Mm-hmm.
tonight. Uh, I feel like we go through this a lot as Cardinals fan this year and over the last few years. We had those good moments where we're satisfied. We're like, okay, here we go, and then we have those bad moments. We're like, okay, this is what I expected. So, I hope with the chance to take a 3-game series lead against the Cubs tonight and move forward with just a bit of confidence in going through the rest of this month. We valued how big the month of June was for this team, and I've seen a lot of upside compared to where I thought things were going to go over the first 2 weeks. So very proud of this baseball team, and I really am just excited to see it. This is fun again, like you talked about earlier. But I hate the Cubs, but it's fun when they're winning and the Cardinals are winning. It's fun as a baseball fan. It's fun as a Cardinals fan. You don't some years you don't really care to tune into those series because one team's doing bad, the other's going to win the series. But these are the times that you're excited. I've been waiting on this Cubs Cardinals series all year long because I knew the totality that both teams had into it, and so it's fun to see both of these teams thriving. But it's also fun to see our young core and even our veterans that were struggling kind of finding and building together once again for the
Right,
Cardinals. So
for sure.
anything you got left, man?
Burleson All Star. It's got to be an All Star game. Donovan,
God,
it's got to be an All Star game. Uh, I'm not too well versed on what's going on in the All Star stuff, but I follow the Cardinal accounts, and they're all pissed off that Burleson isn't in it. I understand there are other bigger names, but he's doing it. He's a perennial All Star. He should be. He's figured it out. He's a legit MLB player now. In the past few years, I'm like, okay, it's good bench depth. I love Burleson. He's a good bench depth. He's a starter. He's a starter at first base, DH, right field, left field. He should be in the All-Star game. Not starting, obviously, but he should be there. Um, Donovan, he's got to be there. Simple as that. He's the best second baseman in all baseball. He's got to be there.
I'll leave the All-Star voting in the description of the episode. Make sure you go vote for your Cardinals to get in, man. I think that Burley has definitely deserved it as well. I think he's been a really great utility man for this team this year, and has played in different positions that have really been needed for us. There have been times where we had injuries or we kind of just need to move pieces around, and Burley's been able to fit in all those pieces. And his confidence and his leadership is really big for this team. So. Huge point, man. Thank you guys for tuning in to episode number 3 of Cardinals Talk. Hope you guys enjoy. Leave a comment, man. What is your enjoying about today's episodes? Anything that you maybe want us to talk about surrounding the St. Louis Cardinals moving forward? We love to hear from you guys, and we appreciate you guys as always. Take care. Go Cards.